My guest today is Mark Torregrossa. So, what we're going to talk about is obviously Mark's background. Interestingly, his heritage is half Sicilian, which is on his father's side, and on his mother's side of the family is Austrian, which I find a very unique combination. Now, were both your parents, were they both born outside of America?
Yeah, my dad was born in a town called Vitamiglia, and my mother was born in Austria.
And you find that a little bit more like with modern guys. Obviously back in the day when immigrants were coming into America through Ellis Island, they would leave there and obviously move into communities of people of their own ethnic background. So you had a more segregated areas of Jewish immigrants, Italian and Sicilian immigrants, or whatever the case may be. As the generations move on and you get into the first, second generation Americans, and these cities, especially in the Northeast, start gentrifying the communities and breaking up these communities. So you start seeing people more integrating with other ethnic groups of people. You know,
Junior Gotti's half Russian.
well, yeah, that's interesting too because they kind of deny that. That
Yeah, but it's true. His father started a thing where, because, at one time the mob was real strict on who they let into the family and stuff like that. And at one time it had to be like you were pretty much 100% Italian. Well, John came out with this shit that he said that as long as the dad is Italian, that means your seed is Italian first. And whatever ground you put it in doesn't matter because the seed is Italian first. It's like a watermelon. A watermelon seed is a watermelon seed. You plant it in any soil, it grows up to be a watermelon. And that was his take and theory on that. And he started that because of Junior, I guess.
well, yeah, 'cause obviously his, something he really wanted to be Junior to carry on his legacy in that life.
Yeah,
Uh,
convenient.
so you were raised in Ridgewood, New York. I've interviewed a couple guys, Ridgewood guys, on the channel. Frank Fiordolino being a friend of yours as well. So did you grow up around those guys, the guys that eventually became the Giannini crew?
Yes, I did. I did. I grew up with all of them. Frank, Paulie Ragusa, Fabio, Anthony Tabita, John Clemenza. I mean, really all the guys. And a lot of guys came new and later on and stuff like that. But I go back with them probably till I was about 8 years old or something like that. We started off playing soccer in the neighborhood, an Italian soccer club, and that's how I was originally introduced to everybody at a very young age. And we used to beat up people and stuff like that growing up. Rip all the gang members' jackets off, burn them, and things like that, kid stuff, really.
Especially in those neighborhoods. I mean, that's ingrained into you, because a lot of these gentlemen that you mentioned, a lot of their fathers and their uncles were mobbed up. Obviously, Frankie comes from a mobbed up family. Joe Galante, I mean, all those guys. Another thing I wanted to point out is that you started in martial arts when you were very young as well, right?
Yeah, real young. I'm actually a second-degree black belt.
And that is something that Frank said that you were pretty dangerous with your hands. So that obviously that was something that you stuck with for quite a while.
Oh yeah, I did it for a long time. Actually, I did it for probably about 20 years. I mean, I did it outside of the neighborhood and stuff like that, but I just started at a young age.
Did you end up fighting in like tournaments?
Yeah, I did actually. I fought in Battle of Atlanta. I fought next to Ernie Reyes Jr., one of the Ninja Turtles. I did an opening segment with him. I was really good at that stuff. Uh, you know, that's how I got popular too in the neighborhood from beating people up, especially with the Ridgewood boys.
Yeah, of course. Showing that you were capable with your hands, obviously your feet as well. So
Yeah, yeah.
you were always doing petty crimes and stuff as you were growing up, but at what point did it
Yeah,
escalate to more?
even though at the time with the Ridgewood, when we were that young, the older guys would use us, let's say, to do an insurance job on their car, pay us about $500. Once the car was on fire already, that's when you call the guy up and you'd be like, okay, it's done, and then he'll report it stolen. But we were doing stuff like that for the older guys as young teenagers and things like that.
And that builds you a reputation with those guys as well. You know, the guys,
Yeah.
the older guys in the neighborhood, which actually Ridgewood, interestingly, was pretty much a Bonanno stronghold. But as I talked about in prior segments here on the channel, Bobby Glasses was also in the Ridgewood area, so he was a Gambino captain.
There was actually a couple of Colombos around too. Like I had a friend that actually owned a strip club that Alley Boy Persico used to go to at one point back in trying to think of what year it is, but anyway, so there was all mixes all over that neighborhood. Pretty much, you could have found anybody there really.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
coming from those neighborhoods, everybody knew somebody.
Well, and like yourself, eventually you started
Sure.
getting involved with the guys over in Howard Beach. So you had those connections. So eventually you got involved with Johnny Boy Ruggiero, who was Angelo Ruggiero's son, right?
Correct. And then he has a little brother that's actually named Angelo Junior Ruggiero, who I knew him too, and I knew his cousins, Jamie, all of them really. I used to work for him at his glass shop called Brooklyn Auto Glass, and even Mike Scars used to frequent there and stuff like that. Me and him were just chit chatting about that the other day. So it's real interesting though. That Johnny Boy was a great dude. Actually, I really liked him.
Is he where is he at now? Is he locked up?
He's actually dead. He died of cancer, just like his dad. Actually, his
Wow.
brother's still out there though, and his brother's still involved with with the family and stuff like that.
And he was Johnny
But,
Boy's younger brother, Angelo Jr., right?
correct. But at my time, when I was around him, I met his brother. I was really running around with Johnny Boy, with Ruggiero. I ran with Peter Spud Zaccaro, helping him at his junkyard and doing other kinds of stuff with him. Well, I robbed Joe Galante of a jewelry heist he did, and I sold it to the guys in Howard Beach. And Junior Gotti actually put it into a flea market to fence the jewelry off.
So is that how you initially kind of got to know them, was through that heist?
Yeah, that was actually the first like any criminal transaction I had through Johnny Boy, but he told me that Junior where he was going to put it and stuff like that because I was going to try to sell it like by weight, and by weight it wasn't worth as much back then as trying to sell an individual piece. So that's why he said his cousin Junior was going to put it in a flea market and set up a jewelry stand with it, which what he did.
You never met Junior Gotti, right?
No, no. Back then, he was running scared. I've seen him around at the glass shop and stuff from the distance and stuff like that. But no, I never met with him. I actually drove around with his brother-in-law, Carmine the Bull, several times. But I never really met Junior. No.
And at that point, Carmine obviously was married to Victoria Gotti.
Yeah, well, not only that, I mean, Johnny Boy was his main guy because even Junior back then was visiting his dad at the prison, and Johnny Boy would take the trips with him, like get on an airplane with him. Not that he would go on a visit with him because I mean, John had strict rules to get visits. The only reason why Junior was going there is because he had that paralegal degree and stuff like that back then. But anyway, that's what he used to do. So he was with Junior every day.
Well, and they grew up together. I mean, they were close. I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
Angelo and John go way back together.
absolutely.
Was Peter Zaccaro, was he part of Johnny Boy's crew?
Well, yeah, because I mean, he introduced me to him for a reason. When I started hanging out with Peter, I was actually driving Peter around. I spent, a lot of time with Peter. At first I didn't really like him. Then again, I was a 17-year-old kid, and the guy looked like a freaking madman, and he was a madman. So, but yeah, eventually I fell in love with him. I became real close with Peter.
Yeah, he definitely had a reputation. It seemed from my research over the years that he was kind of a loose cannon, short tempered. He was involved with the Bonanno family for a while. That was prior to him getting involved with the Gambinos, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was around Frank Bonomo. Uh, that's the banana guy he was around. So now Frank also had a son, and I actually met his son because the original Frank Bonomo died in like I don't know I'm just going to throw out that maybe 79, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So, but his son, who was still involved, his name was Mr. Frank. He used to hang out at the junkyard all day long. Uh, he was still hanging out with him, around Peter and stuff like that also. But pretty much Peter ran with the Gambinos at that point. He even owned a health club called the Ozone Health Club on 101st Avenue, right across the street from where John Gotti's club used to be. Uh, so yeah, I mean, he was with them that day anyway.
Right. Did he get straightened out, Peter Zaccaro?
No, I don't believe he did. But it's funny because even though Johnny Boy put me next to him, I actually witnessed somebody trying to kill Peter. They ran him over in front of the junkyard, and right around when that happened, Johnny Boy told me that he didn't want me going there no more because he didn't know exactly what was going on with Peter. And if somebody was trying to clip him, he didn't want me to get caught in a crossfire, hanging out with him all the time. I had to stop hanging out with him pretty much.
Well, now was that just a temporary thing, or was that at that point just kind of?
It was temporary, and I actually didn't listen to him. I still went there. I didn't go as often or nothing like that. But at that point, I was so close to Peter, that I really liked him. So I hung out with him.
Were you telling me that that ended up being like a scorned girlfriend or something that ended up doing that to him?
Yeah, yeah, it was. I didn't know it at the time, but at the time he was gearing up. He was ready, carrying his 380 Beretta with his fucking silencer on it and his knife in his pocket. He was always ready for war. That guy.
Unbelievable. And it's a scorned lover trying to run him over in a car. That's crazy.
Yeah, but he didn't really see, who hit him. He was actually crossing the street. He flew in the air. He had pins in his leg and all kinds of shit. So anyway, around that time also, it was rumored that he started getting addicted to serious street drugs. Nobody was really worried about the weed like that, which he smoked, because he used to grow hydro.
Hmm.
He was a big marijuana farmer. Made millions and millions of dollars doing it, and he was doing it for a very long time. The best shit out there.
So was he doing that kind of on his own, or was the family getting a cut of that?
Charles Carneglia was involved with him. Yeah, people were getting cuts off of that.
Right.
But I used to go around with him, and he used to bury a lot of money, and he used to put the cash in PVC pipes and dig them around in different addresses all over the place, just in case he needed to get the money or something like that. But he was an interesting guy, man. Real crazy, real fucking crazy.
Now, how close was he to Carneglia?
Pretty close, pretty close.
Because that dude was off his rocker too.
Yeah, actually, from my understanding, he actually testified against Carneglia, and he talked about how Carneglia had a memorabilia from all the people he killed at his junkyard or in his tool shed in East New York. So, like, let's say he killed somebody, he would take a chain or, I don't know, a fucking key ring, whatever it was, and he mentioned that in the court there about Carneglia.
That's like something serial killers do.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I wasn't too fond of him when I met him. He's another maniac. I met him once. The day I met him, actually, he walked in where I had all that jewelry laid out in an apartment, but he walked in with Johnny Boy. And, hey, kid, look at this shit. Look at all this shit you got. You know what I mean? So anyway, me and Johnny Boy worked out a deal where he bought it from me and stuff like that. Uh, so that's how that happened, pretty much. And that was the only time I met him, actually.
Oh,
I met a lot of other people through Johnny Boy, but that was the only time I actually seen Charles.
yeah. Okay. And then that's what I wanted to clarify for the listeners is that it was Charles Carneglia, not John Carneglia. Charles seemed like more in the mindset of a DeMeo, kind of got off on doing the work himself. Obviously had a reputation for dismembering people and putting them in acid containers and everything else. So there's a lot of stories about that guy and the things he did. And at the point that you met him, was that reputation already out about him? Did you already know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like he just a week before I actually met him, he like I don't remember who the kid was, but it's like a little popular story. He threw acid on some kid's foot and was laughing about it. It burned the guy's leg and shit. You know what acid does. So imagine, and he's sitting there laughing at the dude. He's a
Wow.
fucking maniac. Yeah.
And did he have a junkyard as well? Is that what you said?
Yeah, she did. I wouldn't be surprised if Peter and him had something to do with that junkyard together, the one that Peter was at. I'm not saying I knew that for sure, but yes, he had junkyards also.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty lucrative business for organized crime. Because you can do
Well,
a lot of things under the table, hide money. You can launder money, obviously, through it because it's a legitimate business as well. So it seems like and obviously you can make things disappear. You got car crushers, everything else.
him and Peter are the ones who shot Carmine the Bulagnello in the ass on the order of Gotti because he was being towards his daughter, and Peter was there. Charles actually shot him, though. I think it was the way it went, but it was Peter and Charles, and there was somebody else there, I believe, too, that went to his yard and shot him in the ass and told him, you know, watch your fucking ways around Victoria, pretty much, And it's crazy because when I was in the yard with Peter, working with him in his yard, I mean, him and Carmine were still dealing with each other because they both had junkyards. Their yards pass parts around and shit like that.
Of course, especially if they're fencing, breaking down a stolen car and fencing
Yeah.
the parts out. So what was Carmine like? What was you said you've met him a few times, Carmine Agnello.
Well, I actually he took me around my neighborhood once to multiple coffee shops, pretty much to establish the presence that I was around them. And what's funny is I used that situation. I just had recently did a big score for 130 pounds of marijuana, 20,000 in cash, a couple of pounds of mushrooms, a bunch of stuff. Well, anyway, that day when they were going around, I was pretending I was looking for one of the guys that were involved in it. Now, Carmine and Johnny Boy were with me, but they didn't know what I was telling the guy because I was talking to the guy a few feet away from them. Tell this guy I'm fucking looking for them, this and that. Anyway, I wound up beating them on all the stuff. The only thing me and the guy split on that score was the cash the same night we did the score. But I took all the drugs myself. And I actually sold it through them, through Johnny Boy and Junior and them. And I didn't give them all of it, but I gave them most of it because I was fearing it was going to go dry up fast and get bad. So if I dumped them 100 pounds, I kept like 30 pounds to myself, and I sold the 30 pounds. But they gave me 60 grand cash. I'm an 18-year-old kid. That's a lot of fucking money. They could have shot me in the head.
If it was like a one and done thing, maybe they would have, but obviously they knew that they saw you as a small golden goose for them. That it would be stupid for them to do that, where they can make more money off you in the future. You know what I mean?
You're 100% right. And actually, that's something, Joe Galante was involved with a murder. And before he actually committed that murder, he was telling me about it. And I said, Joe, why do you want to do that for? This fucking guy is paying us $5,000 for a stolen car. You're going to clip him for 30, 40 grand. He's worth more alive. What are you, fucking crazy? You know what I'm saying? But anyway, yeah, yeah. Smart people think like that, but not everybody's fucking smart.
Right, they're just looking at the quick cash and not looking at the grand picture. So going back to Joe Galante, I mean, obviously he was wired up by the feds for quite some time. And did any of y'all ever know that around him? That was any of that being talked about? Like, man, Joe's kind of suspicious, or
I was already serving my second bid with the knowledge of that body he committed and stuff like that. And I was already sentenced in like 2000. So I was already gone again. I was gone from 93 to 98 on an armed robbery. And then by 2000, I got pinched by the feds on the Wall Street case. But it's just interesting how they grabbed Frank and a lot of guys even on that murder, and they let him stay out there. And I guess that was his deal. He was doing that shit at that time, from what I understand.
on the last bid you were doing before the feds approached you in prison, was that the Wall Street case that you were doing time on?
Yeah. I was doing Wall Street, the case on the Wall Street case, correct? Which was also a mob indictment, but yeah.
Right, and that was a major ordeal. Didn't you say that there was like upwards of like about 100 guys that got nabbed up on that case?
Yeah, they busted 120 of us exactly at the same time in the morning. and they like kicked everybody's door in almost at the same time to get everybody. And when we got to, it was MDC that day. When we got there, everybody's there. There's 120 people in the room, you know.
Well, and obviously they really line all of that stuff up to coincide at one time because they want to keep the word from getting around and people, ducking out and going into hiding. Can you kind of give a rundown for people that don't know about that case, what that was all about, the Wall Street case?
Well, it was pretty much setting up companies, that had no real par value to them, and having like boiler room operations where people make cold calls and get people to buy into a stock that they believe is. Well, for my company example, I was saying that Amazon was buying me and I was worth millions of dollars already. Meanwhile, the company wasn't worth 20 cents. You know what I'm saying? It was just easier to do back then than it is today.
At what period of time was this?
Well, so actually, it was actually started even before I came home from the feds. I kind of strong on my way into position into doing it when I got there. And I only probably did it for close to maybe a little less than a year, and they busted us, So, but everybody else was doing it maybe for another year before I even got there.
Mm-hmm. And like what time period though? Like what year was this?
Yeah, 99, 2000.
Okay, because going back to what you said a minute ago, you're totally right. It was hard for them to check on these things back then because this was almost before the internet was fully established to what it is today. So they couldn't just jump online and vet these companies to see if you were telling the truth or whatever. You could make up these false statements to show that you have a company that's worth X amount of money, and it's really hard for them to be able to cross-reference that.
Absolutely, but behind the scenes, even after we got busted and we got bailed out, like for example, I was around. At that point, I'm not around the Gambinos no more. I went into the state or whatever, and Johnny Boy took good care of me. Sent my account money. I have a lot of respect to the guy. Let me call the shop every single fucking day. But make a long story short, his little brother banged my girlfriend. She was my girlfriend at the time, and she came to marry me pregnant with his baby. I only found out when I got out, and I divorced her for it. But because of that, when I got out, I started running with the Bananas. In fact, Nat Muley, Frank Fredolino, and Joe Grimaldi came to pick me up to go bring me to Vito Grimaldi when I came home, and I started staying around the Bananas mostly.
So that was Angelo Jr. That was basically sleeping with basically your fiance, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so
Johnny Boy was mad about it. He got, from what I understand, he was real pissed off about it because it ruins relationships. So, but yeah, that's pretty much what happened there.
yeah, I'm sure he had the conversation with his brother. Like, out of all the broads in New York, you're gonna sleep with this guy's.
She was working for them, like, because to help her, I was gone. They were sending, they were still giving her money, but she was running like festivals with horses and ponies for them. Actually, Mikey Scars owned the horses and ponies, and my wife was doing she was my ex, but she was doing the festivals, for them.
So she was around them exactly. So
Mhm.
and then you're
Even
out of the
if I
picture,
was
right?
gone, she was around them still. Correct.
Right. What a scumbag move, though.
There's no honor amongst any of those people, really. To be honest with you, it's in the end you find yourself pretty much alone, especially when you're faced with something. Everybody they scatter. You know what I mean? Everybody fucking dips.
So at the point that you got out on that, and
So when I was out on bail with the federal pinch anyway, I was out on bail in the Wall Street case. We tried to snap into another role, and at the time I was around Vito and his son-in-law Joe, who was actually the boss for a little while till they sat him down. The sat him down, but we were setting up companies with dead people's names at that point, so we were still trying to do business. Even after we were busted by the feds on the original Wall Street case, where the companies were tied to our own names, and that's how we got busted because of the paper trail.
but at this point you were doing it with the Bonanno guys.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
I was dropping off money to them and stuff like that. I was on record with them at that point.
Right. And so at this point, you were back around Frank Fiordolino quite a bit.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right.
Frank, but a lot of stuff I did with the Wall Street guys, I was connected to his Vito son-in-law Joe, and that's where I was reporting at that point in Greenpoint. Uh, so that's where I was dropping my money off to and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Back then he was an acting captain though, because his dad was a captain or away or something like that, from what I remember. Uh, he became a boss years later after all that stuff.
Oh, you're talking about Grimaldi.
Joe Caminano,
Oh, okay.
it's his son-in-law.
Right. And then obviously for people that follow things that are going on currently on the street, it was the Grimaldi funeral that Mancuso sent the Bonanno guys to, that the bikers ended up beating him up in the funeral parlor.
Yeah, that's a mess. That's
No doubt.
that's pretty wrong. That's pretty wrong right there.
Well, and it makes you even look double bad when the soldiers that you sent into the funeral parlor get their ass handed to them.
The bottom line, it really isn't what it used to be. I mean, they sent three guys in for one guy, and then you got another six jumping on those three guys at the funeral. It became like a hell show, in the middle of the guy's funeral. I have respect for the guy. He's dead there.
Right. Yeah. That's the unbelievable part, is that they would have the audacity to do that in a family funeral of somebody who was a long-standing member of the family. Even if he was shelved or not, he still put a lot of time and history in the family, a lot of work. It's like, have some respect.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy stuff.
Right. So, real quick, how did you eventually get to the point that you're at now? I mean, obviously the feds approached you at some point. At what point did that happen, and how did that all transpire?
Well, pretty much, I was away doing my bid, and I was sentenced, and I was in Population. I was in a place called Farron,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was there, and I was waiting on a visit. I actually was getting a real visit that day.
Mm-hmm.
So they called me to the visiting room, and I go down to a visiting room, and I don't see my visit there. Usually your visit's waiting in the room already. Before you even get there, they're already sitting down. So I figured, oh, maybe she went to maybe my wife went to the bathroom or something like that. Anyway, so about 10 minutes later, I go to the desk. I'm like, oh, where's my visit at? He said, what's your name? I said, I'm Mark Torregrossa. He says, hold on, let me look. He looked on a piece of paper. He said, oh, no, you got a special visitor right now. You see that room over there? And when I got in the room, there was, homicide detectives and federal agents in the room, pretty much. And that's where they approached me. I was already sentenced, gone, doing my bid, and they told me is that because they're not going to spell out names to you. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to
Of
direct you of
course.
who they're going to look at. So they pretty much told me they had enough on me to charge me with conspiracy to murder and RICO charges. At that point, I already had about 8 years in prison, and so they told me I had 3 weeks. If I didn't answer them in the 3 weeks, then I was going to get reindicted for RICO and conspiracy to murder charges, probably face another 20 years, this and that. And so, that's what they did. And I thought about it for 2 weeks, and then I made the phone call.
Of course. And when they say 20, it actually could end up being longer, really, when you factor in the RICO charges on top of the conspiracy.
Well,
Um,
also the feds use a point system, and I already got murders on me. I got armed robberies on me, and I'm already pretty violent. So, yeah, I probably would have got the 20 years, to be
right.
honest with you.
Right.
Now that's getting 20 years for something I didn't even do. Let's point that shit out too. You know what I mean? Because I was supposed to be there and everything. That part is true, but technically I wasn't. So for me to eat something like that is just, I learned at that moment that I had to put me before others at that very point because, I've been in jail 8, 9 years already, even knowing about that murder and other murders. It wasn't my intention to do that until I was in that position. I'm going to eat something I didn't even do now. I mean, come on.
And also on top of that, then you start thinking of the other things. You got this other dude that was banging your fiance. I mean, it's like that life was not loyal to you. You know what I mean? So why be loyal to that life? you know?
Absolutely, and not only that, at that point, everybody's fucking flipping.
Right.
Eventually they don't just make deals with everybody. The feds, if they pretty much know who you are when they go at you, and they're gonna give you those little signs, describing, like they knew I was around the Gambinos and some bananos, and little details and stuff like that. Flash a couple of pictures in front of you and things like that. But yeah, that's that's how it went down pretty much, And then the way Frankie found out about it, because really, technically, I never cooperated against nobody. I never got on the stand.
Right. So you never
Yeah,
testified against
I
anybody.
never testified.
Right.
Never.
Right.
My name was never even on paperwork from what Frankie told me. To this day, he tells me that. He never seen
Interesting.
my name on a piece of paper. I
Wow.
was in Article 35.
Interesting.
That means, that means I was already sentenced, and they went to get me. I really didn't save no time off my bid, to be honest with you. A couple of months. What I did save was not getting new charges.
Right. Not getting that additional 20 plus years stacked on top of what you already had. Right.
Exactly.
As far as the listeners, I wanted to do this interview with Mark, and I wanted to bring him on to give some of his background to you guys because he was around, a lot of, obviously, as y'all know now, a lot of guys who were very embedded in the street. Some guys who are still currently. So
Oh,
we just wanted to do this segment just to have Mark give a little bit of his background. Obviously, we could go much deeper. But Mark, I'd love to have you back on, to kind of break down, like maybe in some little specific areas, down the road.
sure, absolutely, I would do that with you.
Each one of you guys have such an interesting background. I mean, obviously, y'all all came up together, were around each other, but as you pointed out earlier in the interview, y'all each had your own things going on the side outside of Ridgewood, so it kind of gives a very unique dynamic to each one of you guys.
Yeah,
Um,
it is really crazy and interesting how it works out like that. Yeah, but it's true.
right, right.
Thank you, Michael. It was good doing this interview with you.
Uh,
I'll speak to you in the future.